WNST, Towson, Baltimore. Everyone who joined us on our WNST road trip out to Cleveland and Canton and Pittsburgh and everywhere in between. We have a trip left for Nashville on my 50th birthday. You'll definitely want to check that out under the Road Trips tab at WNST.net. One of our contributing partners here for many, many years, one of my first friends in media, is down in Atlanta, Georgia, longtime front office insider with the Saints as well as with the Atlanta Falcons and lots of minor league baseball. He's now doing things for the Pro Football Writers Association, who were part of the hosts of the festivities in the Gold Jackets in Canton over the weekend, as well as with the Bahamas Bowl. Chris Pika, the pride of Mount St. Joe, and they got a little hootenanny for Jimmy Schwartz coming up over there on the west side, coming up here later on in the summer as well. Joins us now from Flowery Branch, and I know you were watching all things Canton, Ohio, and I know you got some Raven soul about you. What say you regarding Ray Lewis and the weekend of Gold Jackets? Pretty good weekend, Chris.
Well, I think it's always a good weekend up in Canton. I think Joe Horgan and Dave Baker, the entire Hall of Fame staff, do a great job in putting together an event that has blossomed and expanded in the last few years. I think the reworking of the schedule where you put the game on Thursday night, where I think it fits better for television as opposed to the day after the game. The other events that they do around it are always very special, and if you've had a chance to visit the Hall of Fame at Canton, you see what a tremendous facility that they have there with the expansion. And when the Legends Village is complete around it, it's an incredible economic driver for that part of Ohio that has a lot of the core values at their essence, and that's celebrating excellence every day, and that's what the Hall of Fame tries to do. And I think that the ceremonies, for the most part, came off very well and didn't go as long as expected, thanks to some shorter speeches, including Ray's, which, if you had told me he wasn't going to set the record that was held by Brett Favre at 36-plus minutes and Jerry Jones at about 36 minutes, I wouldn't have believed you.
I would have bet the over. I mean, I had the over all week.
We all did.
I think we had the over. Ray aside, and we'll get to him in a minute, and I definitely want to get to Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco as we get ready for this Rams game. Chris can be followed at Blog and Tackle Out on Twitter if you want to follow along. Of course, one of our frequent visitors here. The Dawkins thing, he kind of stole the show. And I said this to Dennis Kolatzis earlier this week. I said, for me, I expected Ray to at least medal. He didn't medal. You know what I mean? Like, I will remember Dawkins' speech. I will absolutely remember Jerry Kramer's speech. I thought Shireen and Andrea Kramer from the television side of things really stole my part for me, and I'm friends with them, and they're frequent visitors here. I thought that was a takeaway, that my wife was still looking at pictures of Andrea Kramer and her NFL bed sheets when she was a little girl and how much she loved football, and I know you know these people as well. And I thought Randy Moss did an okay job. I mean, I'm not a Randy Moss guy, personality-wise, player-wise, any of that. I think he's a very worthy guy. I think T.O.'s a worthy guy. But I expected more from Ray's speech, and I got more from Dawkins' speech, and I guess when you invest yourself in 5 hours of it, you can't help but to say that was a good speech, that was an okay speech. I didn't expect much out of Urlacher, and it was what it was. It was a sort of thank my friends, thank my family, get out of here, which is what I expected out of him. But Dawkins stole the show, huh?
They did, and I first want to go back to real quick. Shireen Williams, who was a longtime writer for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, who left after some cuts. Shireen, who's known by her nickname Mother Football, it was given to her there, writes for Pro Football Talk. She was the 50th winner of the Pro Football Writers of America, the Dick McCant Memorial Award, given to a writer for long and meritorious service to the game through their contributions through writing. And Shireen was our, believe it or not, in 50 years, our first female recipient, and a very worthy one. Andrea Kramer received the Pete Rozelle Award, which the Hall of Fame gives out on the radio and television side, and you could not find two more worthy recipients of that award to go in the same year as those two. They've meant a lot to the game, and Shireen, it's funny, a long time ago, I talked with a friend of mine, years ago when I first started in the league, Pro Football Talk was very counterculture. It was like a gossip column on a daily basis of what was going on in the league, and they've gone completely legit. When you walk into the Hall of Fame and you see the plaque for the McCann Award, there's, Shireen Williams, Pro Football Talk underneath of it. She specifically asked for them to be the company that she was listed under, even though she had spent so many years at Fort Worth. She said because Pro Football Talk had given her a lifeline after that went away. So thrilled for both of them and for Shireen in particular. As far as the speeches go, yes, I think Dawkins' speech stole the show. I think Jerry Kramer, considering how long he had waited to get in, I thought that was just an incredible speech, one that I'm sure he thought he was going to give 20 or 25 years ago.
Yeah, I've heard parts of that, right? Like, I mean, he sits with us, and we always ask him about Lombardi. And those stories of teamwork and leadership and perseverance and Lombardi quotes and, all of that, he's been given that speech at Kiwanis clubs and everywhere he's ever gone forever. And then he took it to another level because I think many people haven't heard that speech, and it's still a hell of a speech to give. And if he's whipping that out of page 8 of the Jerry Kramer playbook for 50 years of giving that speech, I applaud that wholeheartedly. Because that's a message everyone should be hearing at the beginning of the night before the sun sets, I think.
Well, he was one of the first players to write a book about his experience as a player, sort of a first person when, as his playing days were coming to a close. And, you think about it, I would say 80% of the people in attendance in Canton never saw Jerry Kramer play in person, maybe more, probably 90% never saw him. He played at a position that, an offensive line that's fairly anonymous to most of us, unless you're a big student of the game or you understand or you played the position. So Jerry, and what he meant to the Packers' mystique of the 1960s, and the reason why he waited so long in a lot of cases was a lot of the voters felt that too many of those Packer teams had gone into the Hall. And so Jerry, unfortunately, was the one that had to wait the longest out of it, but he certainly is a big part of NFL lore for the key block he threw in the Ice Bowl, and just for what he did throughout the 1960s with Lombardi and Bart Starr and those great Packer teams. And old Baltimore Colts fans will know exactly what I'm talking about because they stood in the way of the Colts more than a few times in the 60s, from them being maybe the team of the decade.
So did Jim Tunney, by the way, but that came up on the bus trip, but that's another story altogether. But yes,
and I've written about that, and that's and so listen, he was incredibly deserving. Dawkins' speech, I think, was I don't think anyone saw that coming, and it was an incredibly inspiring speech, and you don't expect a lot from Hall of Fame speeches generally. I thought Brett Favre's a couple of years ago was tremendous, especially because he did it off the cuff. A lot of times it's either very, very rote or just very kind of over the top. And you're reminded about, even though he didn't play, you're reminded about what happens when some players are getting older. Mick Tingelhoff had issues with his memory, and they had to tape a thank you from him. And they did the same thing with Bobby Beathard, who's dealing with some Alzheimer's issues now. And it's sad to see from someone who built great franchises in Washington and San Diego and was part of a lot of Super Bowl teams. So it is what you get out of it, and it's a trip down memory lane. It's an opportunity for people to kind of look back at the players that they loved growing up, and certainly for Philadelphia for Dawkins and Baltimore for Ray Lewis. It means a lot to the fans to see those guys enter the gates of Canton.
He is Chris Pica. He is Blog and Tackle out on Twitter. And, you mentioned the difference between the Jerry Kramer speech he's been giving for 50 years and then the Brian Dawkins speech that he maybe thought he was never going to write. And, I think he was, thrilled to be there and very prepared, and then sort of did go off the cuff at the end once he sort of decided what he was going to say. I don't know that he began the day knowing he was going to be talking about his depression and, the deep, dark depths of all of that. And then there's Ray Lewis, who just got up and sort of winged it, as I would like to say, not mentioning Terrell Suggs or Brian Billick or Marvin Lewis or David Modell or, lots of people that I quite frankly thought he should have mentioned, along the way. And I know they don't really care so much, but I thought as a prepared speech, this was the one time Ray didn't have to beat on his chest and go rah-rah. This was a time, I think, that may have been better at the podium for him with some prepared notes, that may have been a better speech for him, because I've seen this speech before over and over again, and we've replayed it here. It's out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. If you weren't awake on Saturday listening for it, I was underwhelmed. I didn't think there was anything really memorable about it, and for that, I'm disappointed for Ray, because I think he didn't medal at his own Hall of Fame ceremony, and I think that's unfortunate.
Well, watching it, and like I said, I've seen bits and pieces of him over the years and what he said. You know, when I saw him walk out with a wireless microphone, I just went, "Uh-oh, this is going to be completely off the rails." And you know, this is, as someone wrote, and much better than I could. You know, it was basically a Ray Lewis TED Talk for with 33 minutes. You know, this was Ray's greatest hits of, you know, what he wanted to say about his life and his career and the lessons he's learned. And you know, there's a lot of confliction about Ray Lewis. Certainly not to the people who love him and revere him in Baltimore for everything he's done. You know, Robert Klemko had a great story in the MMQB early Saturday, which I retweeted and talked about.
And I did too. And you do know I was 8 feet away when Kerry Williams was screaming at him, calling him an Uncle Tom. I mean, all sorts of stuff. You know, I mean, it was a nasty little incident in Denver, and I asked Klemko to come on the show, and he didn't want to. He didn't want to talk about it, and he waited for the morning of Ray Lewis to talk about it. Van Valkenburg wrote a great piece saying that Ray Lewis was full of manure, and I don't really disagree with it. I see the same things they see. I'm in Baltimore. He needs to be revered here. I'm on a bus with people out there, and I'll revere him for all that he does represent. And as I've said, Brandon Suckley always says that he lives in the house that Peyton Manning built. You know, I live in the condo that Ray Lewis built. I mean, we all do. If you love the Ravens or have any part of that if there's no Ray Lewis and it's a Leland McElroy, we got a whole different experience around here being football fans, I believe. And because there's only one Ray Lewis. And that being said, I think we do expect more out of him, and I don't know where the second act is for him. Quite frankly, Goose Goslin and I had a long chat in the press box on Thursday during the game about what the second act holds for him, and I wondered that out loud 8 years ago when I wrote, when he was an active player, what's the future going to be? There's going to be a night in Canton for you. What's that going to look like? What's the business side of this? What's the speech side of this? What's the media side of this? Well, you know, he's already irrelevant as a media member, and that's... You know, that's kind of hard to do when you're Ray Lewis. I don't know that anybody hangs on the words of Ray Lewis, and all he has left now are words and deeds and actions and legacy. And I thought for a jumping off point on Saturday night, he did kind of a poor job, honestly.
Well, someone said this, and what we got Saturday night, and again, I'm not going to deconstruct the speech, and I don't think that's necessarily fair. I think, you know, he said what he wanted to say, but a lot of it is, in the terms of someone else, wrote word salad. Okay, it's the reason why Ray didn't translate very well to ESPN when he was working for them, because Ray, great players sometimes just can't. Guys are just blessed. Okay, he was blessed with incredible physical talent. He was blessed with a mind that could watch film, break down tendencies, memorize what guys were going to do, and he was always in the right place at the right time on the field for that many seasons that he played.
Football recognition and cognition off the charts, as well as ability, as well as passion to do it. Because you know there's only so much homework you and I even do on sports or on what we do. He went to the next level in preparedness for football, which is why I'm so shocked that given a 30-minute podium to give a speech, he wasn't more prepared. That's all.
Well, and the point I'm trying to make is some guys who are like that, they can break it down, they can see it, but the best analysts on television, the best guys on ESPN, the best guys on Fox and game broadcast are guys who can look at a situation a lot like a Tony Romo, that can break it down in 20 seconds for the average viewer and tell them why something is going to happen, or based on a look, hey, this guy's going to be going here, they're going to go through this hole, or they're going to do this. And Ray could have done that, but that's not the type of person he is. That's not the type of speaker he is. He could do it in a meeting room when you have time. It's a lot different when the red light comes on and you've got to do it in 20 and 30-second bites. And he, you know, and it showed on the, you know, on the podiums on ESPN after Monday Night Football. he was just talking these sort of great big platitudes about defense and effort and all those things that he always talked about, but he could never really break down the X's and O's for other people. And I think that's what hurt him in his media life beyond that. And I guess the point of the articles from Klemko and from Van Valkenburg, besides obviously what I think what the locals knew and most people working in the NFL know, that there are bubbles around players. I was around a bubble player in Michael Vick here in Atlanta. That's really the last time, if he wants, that's the last time Ray Lewis can be a public figure. He can now quietly become a private figure if he wishes, doing card shows and other appearances and the like. But in reality, he fades out into the sunset. And a lot of people, we talked about this, and I know you have.
Well, where's Lawrence Taylor today? He's just sort of gone. Where are, if you're not on television, where are you? You know what I mean? I found some old Ravens fans, or you're not on Twitter, you're not saying something, and it's fine to go away, but that's not Ray's mission. Ray thinks he's here to save the world. I mean, he's mentioned that many, many times. I don't think he's going away. It's just who's going to take him seriously at this point.
Well, that's it. And then also for the Ravens, maybe now with this induction, they finally begin to get away from that very large shadow that he cast for so many years, and they've had a hard time after his retirement in developing a vision. Of course, they've had some other issues that they've had to deal with here in recent years at Ray Rice and others that have not put the franchise in the best of lights. But a lot of it's still, it's been Ray Lewis's team for a very long time, and it still is. And in some respects, and I think
he can still waltz in, grab guys' hands, and take two knees in London, on a moment's notice. So I mean, he's got an open door policy to show up and say what he wants and do what he wants. And if he showed up out in Owings Mills today, that there'd be media around him. The Sun would have a little story, and Luke would have a mic in his face, and we do run to what he says here. But I don't. He's on Fox Sports apparently most nights, and I don't even know he's there. Sometimes I walk in a bar and I look up and he's in his suit, and I'm not like running over to the TV and have my ear up like, what's Ray saying? Probably something I'm not interested in, quite frankly.
Well, he's on Coward's show, and I think Ray's better in a one-on-one situation, and I think he fares a little bit better on Fox doing that than he was on a podium with 5 other guys, all of whom are all great Hall of Famers, and you're basically fighting and battling for time in front of the camera. I think Ray's a little better in that sense, doing it as a one-on-one where you can ask him direct, pointed questions about football and get decent answers. And I think I think he fares better there, and he'll still continue to be that kind of presence. And obviously, Ray does things quietly and not so quietly for people, and I'm sure he'll continue to do that. And he's got a lot of kids to be following around in their college careers, and some of whom have gone on to play college football. And he'll be around, but he'll be around as much as he really wants to be. And we'll see from here on out, what that next act holds.
Chris Pika can be found at Blog and Tackle. He works with the Pro Football Writers Association as well as the Bahamas Bowl. And, at the heart of all of this, Ray Lewis isn't playing any more games, and the gold jacket and all that, and the Dawkins and all the stuff we did. But they're playing football here. Rams are in town and shoving the Ravens around. They're going to get together on Thursday night, play some preseason football. I tell you this on Lamar Jackson, and he came into the game in the second half amongst a lot of fanfare, and we're all watching him, and I'm watching him roll out and run these run pass options, and boy, it makes me cringe. It makes me sort of shrink up a little bit as much as this kid's getting hit. I don't like my quarterback running with the football, Chris Pika.
Well, listen, he's a first-year NFL quarterback, and he is a first-round choice, and he will more than likely be the quarterback of the future whenever that takes place. And, the Ravens have to do a lot of work with him. Of course, he comes in the second half. He doesn't have the A-team behind him on the offensive line. He's kind of running for his life back there. Listen, for a first go-around on the field against an opposing team, he made some decisions that when they probably on film the next day, they were probably telling him, hey, you don't need to do this. And, I think back to when Marcus Mariota first got in the league with Tennessee, and he had sort of the same happy feet issues and getting to the right places. And I think, they're trying to drill it into him to go through his reads before he runs with the football. And you get nervous out there, and it just takes time and reps and time under center. And, you'll see that progression as it goes along. I mean, I'm firmly convinced, and this is not based off of one preseason game, I'm firmly convinced that if Joe Flacco went down with an injury, RG3 would be perfectly fine as a backup for the Ravens and be that guy for them. Okay. RG3, again, on very limited information against players, most of whom are not going to make a roster. He looked good. He looked better than he had been. Threw the ball very well, knew when to move around in the pocket, made good decisions. And eventually Lamar Jackson will get to that same place. But, right now, I mean, it's very clear he's the number 3, Lamar Jackson's the number 3 quarterback as this goes along, and he's going to be a project, and they're going to work with him very hard this season because they're going to have a decision to make after 18, one way or the other, whether Flacco gets a final season in a Ravens uniform in 19, or if they feel comfortable enough with him that Lamar Jackson becomes the quarterback in 19. I think that's, and that'll be based on salary cap and other factors. And if they don't make the playoffs, who the next head coach is going to be, there are a lot of changes on the horizon for the Ravens, and it's a big season. And Joe Flacco needs to be, he needs to have an improved performance. He's got improved receivers now. He has to step up on his side of it and help this team make the playoffs. They were one long pass away from doing it last year, but now, the pressure's really on because if they don't make it this year, there's going to be a ton of changes, coming on the coaching staff as Eric DeCosta will have his first major decisions to make.
Am I allowed to talk baseball with you? I mean, not everybody does baseball the way you do baseball. You were at the Braves game and games over the course of the last month, plenty. They are a very relevant team. Obviously, the Gausman thing has happened since the last time we got together. The Machado thing has happened. The Britton thing has happened. But I thought the Gausman scope thing at the deadline, and I have not talked a lot about that because it kind of happened in the midst of Canton, and I'll be talking about that for the next couple of months anytime I talk baseball with anybody. And I don't know how much baseball, quite frankly, we're going to do talking around here now that it's all over with and Adam Jones looks like he's not going anywhere. Boy, what a scene here, right? And you're watching it from afar. You're an Oriole lifer. You worked in baseball. You still do work in baseball often with a team that's been a surprise team down there. This Oriole rebuild thing, we're now looking at a 3 to 5 year plan, right? We're no longer on we're going to be okay next year. I don't know what the plan is here, and I know I've written a lot of Dear Orioles. I really didn't expect them to do this. I endorse it. I mean, I guess if they had a real plan and they had a real general manager and an owner and somebody was out in front of this thing telling people what was going on or maybe expecting people to brace for this. But I think people are really taken aback by the Scope Gausman thing.
Well, yeah, I've said this before. You don't make moves like that. You don't do several moves that the Orioles did without the blessing of ownership, because at some point, if the owners weren't happy with the general manager, what his plans were at that point on any of those deals, they could have stopped. They could have stepped in and said no. Obviously, they potentially had a deal in place for Adam Jones. Adam Jones exercised his rights, is what he mentioned, and it's true. He had the right to say no as a 10-5 guy. Otherwise, there would have been another move involved for more players. It's obvious that the ownership, the Angelos Sons, are comfortable with Dan Duquette making those moves. And I would think at some point here soon, I still think if you're going to let a guy make those kinds of decisions and do what he did with the players that the Orioles had on the Major League roster, that he's your general manager going forward. And I think, to play this out, I think that both Duquette and Showalter should stay in place because this is going to be a much younger team over the next 2 years. And Buck's really good with those kinds of players in the locker room. I think the message, at least for people I had talked to, and obviously people you had talked to, the message had gotten stale in the clubhouse. A younger team that needs a veteran hand. I think Buck's that guy and can help them get to what I think is 2021. I think it's not going to be, I think everyone agrees 19 and 20 are going to be about as bad as this year. But they're trying to get returns on that. The one thing that stood out a little bit for me after the fact and in the middle of all the deals was, and I wasn't down there that night for the game. I wasn't working the Marlins series for Florida TV, but the Braves general manager basically, talked about the Gausman deal and said, we were very fortunate. We didn't give up any of our top line prospects. Now, again, that's their general manager saying that to to the local media there, saying, we were able to make this deal without giving up much in return.
Well, that's because they took on $12 million of O'Day as well. So, I mean, the Orioles managed to shed money. That's what that deal was about.
Right. And so when you look at that, and again, you don't, and I certainly can't speak to the scouting the Orioles did. Maybe they saw something in Evan Phillips and a few of these other players that they really, really liked, and they felt like they would be developing players over the next couple of seasons. And then maybe their scouts said, hey, these guys might be a little bit undervalued. Let's go and get them, in this deal. So, again, baseball trades take a few years to come through to see what it is at the end. I think the most important thing about all of those deals is the fact that the Orioles got international slot money, that they're now going to be players in that market finally, which will help them build up the minor leagues and give them some prospects like a Jonathan Scope that they had that will move up through the system. And maybe it's the dawn of a new day as far as how the Orioles operate. And, at some point we'll hear from the people in charge about what they want to do, and I'm sure that that'll come when they decide one way or the other if Duquette's the guy. But again, I go back to the fact that if you're going to let him make those kind of moves and you're going to gut the major league roster and try to get prospects in return, you got to keep letting him have the keys. That obviously it's different with the son's in charge than it was with the dad.
What if he doesn't want the keys, dude? I mean, he's much like Barry Trotz. When the contract comes at the end of the year, he can just say bye-bye. I mean, hey, I did my job. I mean, to me, I thought of him as trying out for the next team because I don't think he's never indicated he's wanted to stick around. And he's done his job and been a decent soldier. I started to write these Dear Oriole letters weeks ago. My letters to Jones and Showalter and Duquette, I'm glad I never launched them because they're still evolving. The book's not written. It's not done at this point in many ways, and I guess it won't be done in many ways on Duquette because we'll be judging him for years whether he sticks around or not based on these deals in the same way that 17 years later I still judge Sid Thrift on his fire sale. I should hope that the Orioles do a little better than that, but they can't do much worse.
Well, I guess my thought on Duquette is this. Again, you say he's trying out for another job. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But to me, when you're going to come to ownership and you're going to say, listen, I'm looking to do X, Y, and Z, and I have these deals on the table. Do I have your blessing? Is there an objection here, to any of this? And ownership, whoever it is that's making the decision, said to him, okay, we like what you're doing. Go ahead and do it. And to make those kinds of last-second deals like he did, that obviously are more than last-second deals, and it's not something that happens at 350 and you execute at 355. It's something you have discussions on all the time, and I'm sure he kept ownership in the loop because that's what you're supposed to do as a general manager. They were obviously comfortable with what they were getting in return, what he was trying to do, and what they were going to try to do with Adam Jones. They got vetoed at the last minute. So they got players in return. They allowed him to do that, and they had trust in him to do that. Otherwise, they would have said no, and the Orioles would have stood pat at the deadline, which we all would have been screaming about at that point. He did exactly what we thought they should do. And the point I made on Twitter was, a year ago, maybe he couldn't make those moves because someone above him was saying, no, I don't want you to do that. Okay, I'm not signing off on this. Well, so it's a different situation now than it was 6 months ago or 12 months ago. He's going to ownership with moves, and they're being green-lighted where they may have not been green-lighted before. So maybe the work situation is different now than it was even 6 months ago. So it's hard to say that without, some sort of story down the line talking about how those 3 days around the trade deadline really came to be. And I'll be very interested to see, when those stories are written how that all came to pass. But I think his comments about, putting money into the scouting system, putting money in their national system, were things you would not have heard out of Dan Duquette's mouth 12 months ago. And I think every little thing tells a story. And it's little things that don't mean a lot except to the fans, about the return of Brooks Robinson or the return of Eddie Murray. And hopefully at some point the return of Cal Ripken to the fold, okay? These things are all little parts and pieces, but when you put them all together, when you stitch them together, it's telling a story that is yet to be written about the sort of the change of the franchise here and where it's going. Again, we don't know which way it's going to go, but we know that more than likely 19 and 20 are going to suck. And that's the bottom line. And as long as the fans know that, everybody buys in and says, hey, we got young players and we're going to struggle, but we're building towards 2021. The Braves went through that after Chipper left. They went downhill, and they're a year ahead of schedule here in Atlanta, and they made some deals at the trade deadline because they felt they were closer, game and a half behind Philadelphia. As Philly, and no one wants to win that division right now. The Washington struggled. Atlanta's had their struggles. So, they made moves, and they think the addition of the Orioles players that they got will help them down the stretch, especially once O'Day comes in, because right now their top reliever, Vizcaíno's on the DL. They're struggling in the bullpen right now. So they've got some help in that area, and I think they got another starter, which will help them because they've had sort of a shuttle running to AAA Gwinnett, a lot like the Orioles did the last few years when they were relevant. So, everybody thinks they've won the deals, and we'll find out in 2 or 3 years, and in Braves' case this year, whether who won the deals in the short term.
Chris can be found at Blog and Tackle. Chris Pike has been my friend since 1984. You'll also be back. Anything you want to say on Mount St. Joe on the way out the door? I'm going to give you that opportunity.
Yep. St. Joe is going to have is their annual Athletic Hall of Fame luncheon, and one of the Hall of Fame inductees will be class of 1984 Jim Schwartz, who is the defensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champions. I don't know.
And a WNST veteran. We might want to point that out.
Yep, and then hopefully, I know he's trying to get back for the ceremony, and hopefully he'll be able to, but looking forward to emceeing that on Saturday, the 25th of August, over on the Mount St. Joe campus. And I'm sure if you're interested, you can find out more information on msjnet.edu, which is the school's website, and you can follow it to the Hall of Fame.
So I'm from Dundalk, where we say old owls give a hoot. What do you say about the Gales? Is there some catchphrase there?
Well, it's always been Go Gales. It's never been, our mascot for years was like the Notre Dame mascot until they modernized it a few years ago, and it's a nice change. But if you haven't been over the campus, and I know you were, for Styx's press conference when he went to Maryland, they built a brand new gym over there. It's absolutely beautiful. They've redone the football field, the football stadium, and the baseball facilities, thanks to a gift from Mark Teixeira. So they've had a lot of alumni step up and help, and it's a great place to send your young man if you're looking for a great high school for them to go to.
All right, my brother, there's your sales pitch for Mount St. Joe. I'll do Curly and Loyola and Calvert Hall. I'll get Gilman, everybody in here. Always a pleasure, man. It's a busy time of the year. We're watching Lamar Jackson run around some fake football. The Orioles doing some things that are at least making us talk, and as we inch closer to real football, which is now a month away. Chris, always a pleasure to visit with you, man. Take care of yourself.
I appreciate it, Nestor. Talk to you soon.
Chris Pike, Blog and Tackle, out on Twitter. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. Our morning newspaper ships directly to your email inbox free of charge each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's always $10 a month, always judgment-free, always with that lunk alarm, and there's one right around the corner from you. Also brought to you by the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel Park, where they're racing this week. The Laurel entries on the front of WNST.net, as well as in our morning newspaper each and every day. And last but never least, any breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday, driving you home, the SSV on WNST, getting you ready for fake football and Lamar Jackson and RG3 and a little bit of Joe Flacco on Thursday, as well as the Rams are in all week. Luke Jones is out on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and we're also streaming live each and everywhere that you can do it. Facebook and YouTube. Find it out there on our social media and tune us up and in. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.